roosters are so loud. But okay, so we're here with Sonia Herbert, right? Is your last name?
Where do you want me to look?
You can look at me.
Oh, okay.
You can look at me, yeah, so we can have eye contact. There we go.
Okay.
And so Sonia is perhaps one of the most important people here in Bombay Beach, definitely in terms of everything we've done here would never have been possible without you. You know, when I first arrived in Bombay Beach, it was 10, 11 years ago, and you're one of the first friendly people I met here. And since then, you've acquired the Ski Inn, the only bar in town. And for those of you who don't know, Bombay Beach is maybe the weirdest town in the world, I think, the most unusual in many respects. I mean, it's like 80% abandoned. It's on the shores of this, you know, environmental catastrophe of a lake that we love, but also are very concerned about. And it gets to be 120 degrees in the summer, and there's dust storms, and there's just weird characters around, and of course we arrived and made it even weirder. And I want to know, how on earth did you end up in this place? How long have you been here, and why?
Well, I came down in 1974 with my 4 sons. It was a necessity to leave Long Beach and get down here. A very abusive husband, and I needed to leave.
But you're not from Long Beach originally, right?
No, I'm from England.
What part?
In Cirencester in the county of Gloucestershire. It's near Bath. I say that because a lot of people haven't heard of Cirencester.
And how old were you when you left England?
12.
Oh, and why did you leave?
We emigrated over. I didn't want to leave, but we had to come with a family. So
And
your
mother and father are both British?
Yes. Yeah, we came to Downey and just went from there.
And so you were 12, and so you went to high school in Downey.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I mean, we're going to talk a lot about your children. I'm very curious about them, but they seem very similar in age to you almost. Like how old were you when your first child was born?
16.
Wow.
And one at 17 and one at 18. And then a few years later, Vince came along, and then I was 32 when I had my youngest son, Bradley.
So you have 5 children.
I had 5 sons.
And so the 3 that you had when you were 16, how old was the father?
He was 22.
And were you in a relationship with him?
Oh yeah, we were married.
Did you get married
I was
when
a
you were
good
16?
girl. Yes. Yeah, there was no sex before anything.
So you were allowed to get married at age 16 in California?
Yeah, well, we ran away to Mexico.
Oh wow!
And it was all legal, but I thought I knew what I was doing, but.
Which was what? What did you have in mind? That you wanted to start a family when you were 16?
Well, my mother and father split up, so I was sort of on my own, and then I met, his name was Tink. His name was Leo, but everyone called him Tink. So we got along real good, and we just decided, well, we'll go get married. So we went and got married, and we rented a little apartment from some old people. They were lovely, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, and life just seemed to be great.
And this was where? Where did you rent this apartment?
In Paramount.
In Southern California?
Yes.
And so the 2 of you lived with your first son was what was his name?
Roger.
Roger.
Yeah,
okay,
he's such a happy little kid.
Wow.
You know, long blonde hair and just always happy and giggling.
Wow. And so I mean, it must have been amazing. What did your parents think about this? About you being married with children at such a young age?
Well, my mother had gone back to England, and my dad, he was working and doing his thing. He didn't really like that, but he came to accept it, and I don't remember seeing my father much after that. He's a very strict old English gentleman, you know, so I don't think he thought kindly about that.
Wow. And so you and Tink, how long did you stay married?
16 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So he's the abusive husband you had to run away from.
Yes, yeah. I would have stayed, but it just got to, it was just terrible. And he tried to kill me, and I just like took my Volkswagen and $10 and my kids, and we came to the desert. I called my father and I said, "Can I come and stay with you for a while?" And so I got a job within 2 weeks.
Where?
Because I'd never worked before. I up at North Shore at the Anchor Bar and Restaurant. They asked me if I could waitress, and I said sure. And so they were very good to me. And then I got some other jobs. I would work. The marina had a big trash trailer, and I'd haul their trash. And I started a trash service in town. And I'd do roofing, cleaning, whatever I could do.
Can you describe the scene in the Salton Sea in the early 70s like this? What was it like compared to now?
Oh, there was people everywhere. There was lots of people living in the town, lots of retirees that would come for the weekends or were staying here, and they were fixing up a lot of things. They'd build and donate their time around town, but it was people with boats and fishing and water skiing, and it was so exciting. And it was just, there was 5 bars in this town at the time, and they were all full every weekend.
Really?
And it was just a party place. It was a Riviera.
It really was. So there was no indicator of what might happen.
No, none.
You came here thinking this was just a nice little desert beach
Yes.
town.
Yeah, it was. Everybody was into dune buggies. You know, they had the dune buggy club, the Bombay Beach buggy bums, and everybody was just together having fun. There was never any bad things. There's, no violent crime here. It was very safe. You could leave your doors open at night,
And so at this point, you had you had 3 children at this point?
Yeah, 4.
4. And they were how old when you moved to Bombay Beach?
I think Roger was like 14, Adam was 13, Tink was 12, and Vince was 10.
So Tink was named after his father.
Yeah.
And the father at this point disappeared from the picture?
No, he was still living in Long Beach, and then he would come down and talk to the boys, and one by one he talked them into going back and living with him.
Really?
Yeah, so it was sad. I'd come home from work, and I couldn't find one of the boys and never knew where he was, and so then I found out he went to live with his dad. There's nothing I could do.
And so did you lose touch with them when they did that?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been
So
hard.
there was a space of some years that we really didn't communicate. So it's sad because I grew up with my youngest boy, and we have a really good relationship. The others are sort of like there's so many gaps, and there was no, that closeness wasn't there. It just. They all grew up to be fine boys. They had good hearts, good people. But it's just that time, that precious time, you can't recapture.
Right. Well, I remember Roger was almost like the mascot of Bombay Beach when we arrived here. He was such just big-hearted, but wild kind of feral character almost. He would go around on his bicycle with his big white beard and his wild hair and just wild eyes and his sandwich, I remember, always in the front of his bicycle that looked like it could have been there for a couple of days that he would just be working away at, and he had a great sense of humor about his just about his whole style. He was very self-aware, it seems, about what a wild character he was, right?
He really touched a lot of lives. Because he would ride by and, "Good morning, Mom," and just carry on. We didn't really get together. I'd invite him for dinner sometimes. He'd just eat and leave. But when he died, I'd never seen so many grown men cry.
Yeah.
They really missed him.
Yeah, I was one of them.
He really touched everyone's heart. And that made me proud.
Of course.
How
did he end up coming back here?
Well, he lived in Long Beach, and I guess times got rough for him, and he said, "Can I come down and stay?" So I put him in a house, and I said, "Well, you can, when you get a job and get working, you can pay your rent and whatnot." And went from there. But Roger lived and died the way Roger wanted to,
Yeah.
you know.
And which was how? Just very freely, would you say, or?
Yes, yeah. I was going to find him a home for his own,
Mm-hmm.
and before he died, and I just never got. It never happened because he passed away.
Yeah. How old was he?
He was 57 when he died.
How did he die?
He had congestive heart failure, and I didn't realize how sick he was. He was heavy.
Yeah.
He was in intensive care not too long before that, and he pulled all the tubes out, and somebody saw him walking down the street with just his gown on, with his butt showing, and someone from Bombay happened to be driving by and brought him home. He just was not going to stay in the hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And let's back up a little bit, because obviously the way he was and the way Bombay Beach became is very different from the scene that you're painting of this kind of idyllic 1970s beachy town. Like, when did Bombay Beach start to change?
I think when the water started to rise, and we had to put a berm in to save the town because the water came right to the top of that berm. A lot of people they got older, they either passed away or went to live with their kids or went into homes. The houses sort of were left, their kids didn't care to come down. So everything sort of went downhill.
Yeah.
And then
Did it happen fast, or did it happen gradually?
it was gradual, and then there was they kept portraying Bombay as it stinks, the water's contaminated, you can't eat the fish, and giving it a really bad reputation, and people stopped coming down.
Yeah.
And then they did the water transfer. They sold the water to LA and San Diego, so now the water's receding. So now the fishermen don't come here,
Yeah. But at least
So-
we don't have the town flooding. I mean, I'm looking through this window in the asylum, like I see, houses that are all damaged by flooding. In a way, it's nice to have the sea a little farther away now, isn't it? Or
No, I would like to see the water back. I think it could be revived like it'll never be like it used to be.
yeah,
There was 5 bars in this town, and each one was different and exciting, and it's never going to be the way it was. But it's still a beautiful area. Look at our views. You can see for 100 miles.
yeah,
Our air quality is excellent. We
Yeah.
have excellent water from
Yeah.
Coachella Valley water. And it's just a safe place to be. You can come here and decompress.
absolutely, and also be very free. Like, I think we should talk. It's interesting. Our friend Susanna is making this film about everything happening here, and she pointed out that it's kind of a place where people come who, like, maybe had unusual or difficult childhoods. Like, we all seem to have had like absent parents in some way, and we all kind of maybe grew up feeling like outsiders, I think, and then suddenly found this place where outsiders feel at home. Do you think there's some truth to that?
In a way, I think so. But I think everybody is sort of all on the same playing field. We have all kinds of people come to town, but everybody's sort of treated like a person. Because you have $1 million, should we treat you any different? That doesn't,
Yeah.
There's so many interesting people that come to town.
It attracts the interesting people.
It does.
Not the normal people.
It does. It's fabulous.
So how did you end up? Because you own a lot of property here in Bombay, including the bar, the ski inn. How did you end up starting to acquire properties here? And what was your thinking there? Like, when you?
Well, I have a partner, Ernie, and I was helping people buy houses, because I knew everybody and who was selling what, and I just connect the two together. And Ernie
was
says,
when?
"Well, 2001. And he said, "Why don't you buy a piece of property?" I said, "But I don't have any money." And he says, "You don't have to have any money. You just have to make a deal." a little down, little a month. And so I started to do that. And right then, properties were so reasonable,
Reasonable is
almost free.
yeah.
And so then I just was excited about buying property. It's like gambling, I guess. So I would buy what I could afford, and just Ernie would fix them up, and then we'd rent them out. So that generated a little more funds. So that's how that all evolved.
Yeah, I mean, when I came here the first time in 2008, and there would be things that would sit on the market for years,
Yes.
for just like a few $1,000s, right?
Right.
And people couldn't get rid of things even if they wanted to, right? I mean, that was the it doesn't feel like a place in the United States in a way. It feels almost like there's almost like a third world vibe to it in the
Yes.
best way too, also because there does. I think in a lot of the country you don't realize this, and it's ironic because people talk about America being a free country, but I think that there's actually a lot of authority, a lot of oppression, a lot of rules, and you don't realize it until you come to a place that's actually free. And maybe the sheriff comes once a day and just circles around for 5 minutes, but for the most part, it's a very equal community where no one has authority over anyone else.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly. Yes, you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, it's a people who come down, jump in their dune buggy, take off across the desert, go have a great time, have a nice bonfire in your yard at night. You could. It was just like you say, a land of freedom.
and of course that seems to drive some people crazy. It seems to be that some people come here wanting there to be more authority and getting very distressed about everybody doing what they want. And I have to ask myself, like, why did they come here? Right? Like, who we're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Well, most of those people were big party animals.
Really?
Yeah, and now that they've gotten older, they've soured and become bitter. And it's a shame because they were fun people,
Yeah.
and now they're not fun anymore.
You're still fun, though.
You bet.
How did you end up acquiring the Ski Inn? Because this seems like a full circle in a way, from like working in the bar when you first arrived, and now owning a bar. What was that like, and what is it like, especially now with the pandemic and everything? We have to talk a little bit about that.
Well, when we bought the Ski Inn, I didn't need another job, but Wendell was in his 90s, and Janie was 86.
These are
and
the previous owners.
Yeah, she had Jane and Wendell. She had a stroke, took her sight away. She couldn't cook anymore, so we didn't want the bar to close. So we talked to them and said, "Look, she'd known me for over 50 years. I knew them long before they came here
Oh, really?
in Riverside." So I said, "Why don't you? We'll buy it. We'll just if you can make a deal with us, we'll buy it." And that's what happened. So we now have the famous Ski Inn.
Which
still.
is the lowest bar in the Western Hemisphere.
Yes,
Why is that?
because you're 230 feet below sea level.
That's so wonderful. There's a town south of here where there's, I guess, like a grain silo that's more than 230 feet tall, and then there's like a little line at the top down in Calipatria, right? And it says sea level, and you're looking way up at
Yes.
this big building,
Yes.
right? And so meanwhile, so your children, did they start to all come back one by one?
My second son, he was in prison for over 20 years.
Can we talk about that? Like, why did he go to prison?
Bank robbery
Wow, where did he rob a bank?
in Washington. He robbed about 5 banks, and he gave his money to his girlfriend so she could pay her bills. I mean, it's good-hearted, but it was a stupid thing to do. I mean, he traded half his life for that.
What was his? Did he like go in like with a gun and hold up the bank teller like in a
No,
movie?
he'd just go in there with a note, and threaten them, and then get the money, and you just take the money and run.
And how did he get caught?
He was working at Denny's, and they came in looking for him, and they finally figured out. He gave them some other name, and they figured out who he was and took him in. But I was in Europe at the time. I was living in France when that happened, so I didn't get to partake in anything. So
Wait, you left that part of your story out. How did you end up living in France and when?
Oh, I married again, and my ex-husband was in aerospace, so they sent him to England and France. And at that time, I was a paramedic supervisor in for Mercy Ambulance in Fontana, and so I really didn't want to give up my job, but I knew I had to go to Europe, so that's what happened there. So we went over there. So then when I was over there, I learned about Adam's dilemma, and there was nothing I could do.
What year was this?
Whew, I knew you'd ask me that.
More or less.
It's in the 90s,
Yeah.
80s, in the 80s.
And so he got sentenced to how many years?
20.
20 years. And where did he go to prison?
In Lompoc Federal Penitentiary.
Wow.
That's a horrible place to go and visit. They treat you just like you're an inmate.
Really?
It's terrible. There's just so many rules just to go in and visit.
Did you go often?
Yes. Yeah. I was living at Riverside at the time, so I would go up and visit my sister in Medford, and then I'd go on up and then visit him because it was quite a long ride.
And what did because he's a big part of Susanna's film. What did this time in prison do to him as a human? Like, how did you see him changed by it?
It has a lot of mental scars, living in prison and watching people killed, almost daily, and just having to survive. It really alters a person. He's still a good man, but he has his issues. He has days where he throws rages. It's almost like his mind is trapped.
Yeah.
It's sad.
He's also an artist, right?
Yes.
What is his art?
He draws,
Uh-huh.
and he draws in a peculiar way that people really like it. It's really different, and just people swoon over his art, which is great.
Did he learn in prison?
Yes, yeah, he had a buddy in there, and they would paint and draw together.
Wow. And so then when he got out, when did he get out of prison?
I forget the day we went to pick him up. My mother was with us, and we picked him up, and we brought him down, and he got car sick because he hadn't been in a car that many years, so he really got car sick. And it was really just all new to him. I mean, he'd never been out of the prison walls.
How old was he when he was arrested?
Oh, gosh. He had to be, 20, maybe?
Oh, so young.
Yeah, he was in a lot of trouble. So I'm terrible with dates. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So he was 20 when he went and 40 when he got out.
Yes.
More or less.
Yeah.
And did you bring him back to Bombay Beach?
Yes, my mother was living here at the time then. She decided to come and live closer, so I put her in a house. And so she was having trouble with her eyesight, so she wanted him to drive for her, be her driver, and do little errands. So she helped him and he helped her. Mm-hmm. So it was a win-win situation.
And he's still here. I mean, I see him always riding around on his bicycle.
Yes.
And
yeah.
wow. And he's your second son?
Yes.
And then tell me about your other children.
Tink, he's my third son. He lives in Kentucky. He works at a printing press company. He's got some great ideas that he's already got patents on, and
Really?
hopefully the product will go.
Does he ever come to Bombay?
Once in a great while, he'll come down. Mm-hmm. He is an excellent Volkswagen mechanic, and very smart. But he has a nice home, a nice family, doing very well.
Nice.
Yes.
And then who's next?
Vince. Vince is living in Riverside, taking care of his ill wife. And Vince is a German glazer, and he does magic things with mirrors. He makes mirrors, and he's very inventive.
And he does windows too, right? He's
Yes.
done some windows for some of our properties.
Yep. He's a experienced glazer. That's what glazers are, window guys.
I mean, it's interesting because you have these, all these grown children, and then I feel a bit like you're the mom of Bombay Beach in a way. Like you have this maternal energy that you bring to all of us, you
Well,
know?
I still see a lot of kids that went to school with my kids, and they think of me as mom, and I treat them like I'm their mom, and it's like, boy, I wouldn't hesitate to haul off and hit you inside the head if you misbehaved, you know, and they know it.
Is that is that what you see as the role of the mother, is to keep people in line a bit? Speaking of the authority and versus freedom, do you think do you see your role as keeping things in check a little bit in this town?
Yes, 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 you have to.
In
You
what,
do.
in the place of a more maybe paternalistic police presence, we have a more understanding but still strict mother here.
Well, there's certain people here that like to squat, and we can't have those people squatting because their their habits are filthy, and it's not good for anybody.
So let's talk a little bit more about Bombay Beach as in terms of like when we arrived, the artists as they call us. I like to think that we're all just residents and lovers of this place, this peculiar place. But there does seem to be this kind of cliquish, like this group thing that's happened in a way, like especially when you go to the community meetings, they talk about the artists as if it was like one entity.
That might have been my fault because it was a wonderful thing when all of you came to town. It was so exciting. It was such a renewal, and we would say, "Well, the art people are here," and so that sort of stuck. Well, this guy bought this place. Oh, it's one of the art people. So that's how you got to be the art people. But it's been the best thing for Bombay. It's a renewal.
Can you describe how it happened from your point of view? We've never talked about this. Like, what was the scene like before we arrived, and then what was it like? This kind of slow influx of new energy.
Well, I would read different things in the newspaper, and I'd hear, little broadcasts here and there on the radio about this ramshackle town, this ghost town, this place that's living on the stinking Salton Sea, and it just made the place sound so bad. And I'd look around and I think, oh man, this place is really in such need of some repair, and it's such a great place. It has a magic vortex here that draws people here. There's a magic here, and people feel it. So when you guys showed up and started making plans to do this and that, it was so exciting. You've renewed us. You've made it a whole different town.
Well, I mean, again, like as I said at the beginning, is like it would have been impossible without your support and Ernie's support and some of the other, people who are already here giving us love and encouragement. Because obviously, like I think that we have probably like a 80% approval rating from the people who were here before we got here. Some of the people who disapprove, I think actually I was here before them, and it's funny to hear them say like, "Go back to LA," and I'm like, actually, you got here 5 years after I did.
Right.
But because I started coming here in 2008, and I was shocked that there wasn't more of a creative community here. Because I think artists are attracted to places that are unique, places that are specific, places that aren't, I think leveled by the. If you go to, most places in America, they're all the same because they have the same corporate presence between Denny's and Chevron, and the strip malls all look the same. So that's not very fertile ground for an artist, right?
No.
Also, there's no room for interpretation. If you go into a strip mall everyone here can imagine what it looks like to get off the highway and see the same 10 stores and just see pavement and all the cars the same. And where is an artist supposed to leave their mark in that environment? It seems almost designed to make that impossible, right? To make any sort of individual creative expression possible. So I think when I arrived here, I was really amazed. I would see people shooting like music videos or like some fashion shoots, but they were almost like afraid of the place. It seems like they would leave as soon as it got dark, right?
Yes.
And I started saying like, I was married at the time, and I would say like, can we just buy a little house in Bombay Beach? It's really cheap. And my wife thought I was crazy. And so as soon as we got divorced, I got a place here. And I started coming here and staying the night and realizing how fun it is to be able to go to the ski inn and have some drinks and not have to worry about driving home and just walk down the street. And we would all hang out in this very humble little double wide trailer. But it was just, you could feel that vortex that you're talking about. You could feel that atmosphere of despite all of the sadness of the decay, the ruins, the issues with the sea, all of that seemed more than made up for by the beauty and the uniqueness and this special energy that you're talking about.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I would start bringing people down here and trying to get them excited about this place. And a lot of them looked at me like I was crazy a little bit. But they also got it. So it was interesting. Like nobody wanted to leave when they got here. You know, they liked it. And then there was such a great kind of confluence of energies coming between meeting Lily and Stefan, who I've known since childhood, and this absurd idea of bringing, you know, high art to this place where you would least expect it. And you know, bringing opera and ballet, and Stefan has such an incredible sense of like showmanship and almost like, I think of him as a circus ringleader in the circus of life, though.
Yes.
And so describe a little bit more what that was like for you, seeing this all happen and then kind of trying to sell the other locals on it. Obviously, that's an ongoing conversation and battle that we're fighting. But
Yes.
what's that like? What was that like for you at the beginning, and what's it like now?
Well, just explaining to people, I mean, some of these installations cost lots of money. And these people are bringing this and placing their installations here. They're not making any money. They're not asking for any money. They just want to be accepted. So we would talk to people and say, hey, look at what they're building over here. Isn't this great? It just, and just try to give it a positiveness that you know, they didn't know what was, well, we don't want these people putting this. They didn't know what was coming. So you sort of had to lead them around and say, now look here, isn't this a beautiful piece of art? You know, it just enhances the town. And pretty soon people, yeah. And then when the Biennale came, it was so exciting to see so many young people. And you could tell they were from Hollywood and other places because of their dress. And it was just exciting for the town. It just got out of that blah, dead, ramble shack town, and now we're starting to sparkle. Yeah. It was wonderful.
And then so there's these famous community meetings, which I need to describe a little bit. Well, have you been on the board or just Ernie?
No, I just Ernie.
How does it work, the town politics here? What is this town? Because you go to these meetings and they go on for hours, and you get a lot of emotion, a lot of you know, battling of ideas and visions.
Well, really, the services district is there just to pay the bills. But since we don't have any other voice in town, it's sort of a sounding board when we all come together and bring our ideas forth and our complaints. So that's how that sort of evolved. It's every 3 years, the seats become open, and then you vote. People in Bombay have to vote for who they want on the board. So there's been lots of good people on the board, and there's a lot of people that just don't want any change, and they want it go back the way it used to be, which will never be, and they're just bitter. And those people need to do something else, because we need open-minded people on the board to make this town flourish. Agreed.
But I like this fact that they're very democratic in terms of, and of course it doesn't yet reflect the changes that have happened. I think that it will as time goes on and more people have, you know, as we've ended up influencing a lot of wonderful creative people to buy places here and spend time here. Yes. I mean, now we have no Biennale this year because of the COVID, but we still have probably 40 or 50 artists in town right now.
Yes.
And I imagine that's been good for you in terms of like owning the bar. Like, what's the atmosphere like at the bar now compared to the way it was 10 years ago?
Oh, the business has flourished. And then they come and they bring their friends, and the place will fill up. We'll have great times, and business has been a lot better, and they've put us on the world map. Bombay has been in the Tokyo News, the London Herald, the New York Times. We've
Yeah.
been everywhere.
So let's talk more about this motherhood idea, because I again, like, I see you a bit of like the godmother of Bombay. You have these children that are all amazing, original characters. Like, would you say like motherhood has? How would you say like having these children so early and your experiences of being a mother has like changed you as a person?
Having them so young, I grew up with them when they're real young years, and I enjoyed my boys, and and their friends would come over, and I just treat them like my own children, you know, and it just I just felt like a kid myself, and I give them lots of freedom, you know, when. It's like my youngest boy, Bradley. I would let him go for a walk on his own here, and I'd time him, and I'd say, "You can walk around the block, and you come right back home," which he did. So one day he was a little late, so he came in the door with this big orange in his hand. I said, "Where did you get that?" And he said, "Over there." The lady across the street had an orange tree, and so he went and picked it. And I took him over there, and I said, "You tell the lady you picked the orange." And he did, and she said, "That's fine." But she would have a big mound of sand, and she'd have toys there. And that was her toy. She saved toys, so she'd let the kids play in the toys. But I, I think a child needs to be able to experience a little independence, to get out of the house and be trusted to go around so far and come back, and you know, makes them responsible. But this day and age, you really can't do that. You can't do that in the city.
No.
You could do it here, but
And what about your rapport with men in terms of like, or your vision of men having these four like very strong male children, and then this husband who was abusive? I don't know. Just very interested in the way masculinity and femininity appear to us here, especially in this place. Like I said, we all had these kind of absent fathers, it feels like. And what are your thoughts on male energy in general?
I think the way their father was, it really put some scars on the boys as far as their perspective against women, and I think that's hurt them in a way. But
Do you blame their father a bit for like Adam's choices, for example, of being
yes,
a bank robber? And
yes, yeah, he could have been more of a father, and instead of just letting them just go do and whatever, you know, raising a child, you have to be strict. Not really strict, but you have to have rules, and they have to abide by the rules, because they're going to go out in the world, and if they don't have any building blocks to work with, then it's what are they going to do? You know, it's how can I explain this?
well, it's interesting because, like, again, like I had an absent father, and then, you know, obviously the way you were describing your family, there is this kind of, there seems to be a theme of an absence of authority, and in a way we're all drawn to that, but it doesn't come without problems, let's say, and maybe we see that a little bit around
Right.
here. Like freedom is it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yes. And it's a job raising a child, because a
Yeah.
child is for life,
Yeah.
you know, and you've got to be loving but strict.
Yeah.
You know, there's got to be a balance. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I'd do a better job.
What would you do differently?
A lot of things. It just, being so young, too, no patience. You know, I should have been a lot more patient with my boys. But Maybe I'll come back again and be a better mother.
Maybe we come back. Well, so I wonder if people are coming here who also, yeah, like I said, didn't have the traditional upbringing and family, and in a way, I find that we're making a new family. Do you think?
Yes, I do too. All feel like we are family, and we treat people that way. Even the strangers, they're not strangers very long. They just, well, we've got to come back here. We love it here. You know, like in the skiing, when they come through the door, we would greet them. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you. Glad you're here. It just makes their day to know they're noticed, you know, and it's genuine. It's not just words.
And you have to confront all the things. I noticed, like, I mean, we've even had a fight before. Like, we can argue, and we have to make up because we're in this small little square.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, so it forces, like in LA, a lot of people, like, they just disappear out of each other's lives, and it's so easy to just like say, oh, that relationship is complicated. I'm just gonna ignore it and move on to the next thing. And there's a superficiality that LA is famous for, and I think it's largely due to the ease with which you can just like ghost people, you know. And here in this supposed ghost town, there's no ghosting anybody. You're gonna have to see them.
No, you have to work it out if you want to get along. There's got to be a solution. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that. And that's why I do think, as frustrating as these town meetings are, I also find them very, you know, nurturing in a way, because we have to work it out, and we have to, like, you know. And the last one, they were like talking about wanting to get a lawyer, and I'm like, if you want to get adversarial, that's up to you, but that's not how we're going to fix things here. We should
No.
find common ground.
That's right.
And figure out where we could, because a lot of the things we were all on the same page. We all love this place.
Right.
We
I just don't understand their problem. I mean, it's like they've grown very bitter, and they just want to be in their own little cocoon. And this is a nice town, and it's a sharing town, and they want control, and they can't have control.
That's what I'm seeing is an overarching theme. Also, there seems to be this desire to control, and in a place that's kind of inherently uncontrollable, right? Like, nature is strong here, right?
Yes.
So you have this inherent, like, wildness about it, and we're all facing that, right?
Yes.
And it's got two sides. It's got a beauty, and it's got, like, you know, like, we feel like we can express ourselves in ways that we could never do in strip mall America, and it's original, and it's funky, and then it's also got a darkness to it, I think, too, which I think also attracts artists because it feels very real. But there does seem to be, in a way, this feeling that Bombay Beach is the underbelly of the American dream, that you have, like, you know, they have Modernism Week in Palm Springs, and it's white picket fences and lots of money and swimming pools and perfect design and never like a little, no imperfection. Right? And here we're like, you have people who are drawn to the imperfections, right?
True. True. But, you know, here in the desert, there's a beauty. We have fantastic views of the mountains, the sea, when the cactus bloom, the vivid colors, the scent in the air is gorgeous. When the white pelicans come, they're like ribbons in the sky, and they just glide in, and it's just, you just stand there, and it's so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and you think, yes, I can go to the city and shop and do whatever, and then I'm done with the noise and the people and the shoving, and I come back here.
And I remember when I first met you, you showed me you had this beautiful house in Mexico that has incredible views of the sea, and I was shocked that you wanted to be here instead of there. What makes you want to be in this funky place instead of like just a more traditionally beautiful place?
Well, we have lots of business here, so it keeps us here, and it's nice to go there, but it's nice to be here. It's so that's sort of like a little vacation. Go down there for a few days and come back. I don't know. I guess my heart is here.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have that feeling. And what do you see? What are your hopes for? You say, obviously it's not going to go back to the way it was. May I ask how old you are now?
76.
Wow.
I don't feel it.
And you had COVID, right?
Yes.
And you survived.
Oh yeah.
What's
It
that?
was mild.
It was. I heard Ernie was very sick, though, right?
Yeah, we were in bed about 5 days. He had worse symptoms than I did, but I just couldn't sit up. I'd get so dizzy. But we just no energy, and that irritates me because I'm very energetic and I just like to go, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
So I just continue taking my zinc and my echinacea and my D3.
And how did this whole pandemic affect the town in terms of like because you had to close the bar for a while, right?
Oh yeah, it's still closed. We've been closed a year, but the town became sort of a desert. It just everyone disappeared. You wouldn't see anyone on the streets. You wouldn't see anybody you knew for months. It just everybody stayed in, and there wasn't any COVID here. The first case I knew of was a mechanic had moved in town, and he'd gotten a job in India, and he went to work, and someone at work had it, and he caught it, and he stayed by himself. He was the only person I knew of that had it at that time.
And do you see a light at the end of the tunnel now? What do you see in the next few years? If assuming now with the vaccines and everything, and this thing is going to pass, what is your hope for your own life and for the life of this town?
Well, I think it's all going to come. It's all going to even out. People will have their vaccines, and this thing is going to sort of mellow out, and we'll get back to some normalcy, and the town's going to be exciting again. Everything is going to start flowing beautifully. The bar will open. We'll have great parties and a fun time.
Amazing. All right. Well, let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to ask you. Just a second. What's your just bit for Susanna? Like, what's your relationship with Adam like now? Now that he's like been out of prison for a while, like.
We get along fine. He comes up and he helps, but he'll work only when he wants to work. He rides his bike around like a 12-year-old. But I know he's a good guy, and he's really into his artwork. And we get along fine. It's nice.
I know you can't go back and do things differently, but what about advice for young mothers that are having children now? What would you say from your experience of having all these children and having to raise them and seeing what can go well and what can go wrong? Do you have any...
I think you need to be somewhat strict. There's nothing worse than a spoiled child. Yeah. It spoils everything, even themselves. I think these computers and these phones, myself, if my son couldn't afford a phone, he wouldn't have one. Yeah. You can't just give a kid a phone to play with, just like keep him busy. Yeah. You've got to stimulate them, let them go outside and play and use their imagination, but watch what they do, especially with the internet these days. We didn't have any of that, but just treat them like young adults, that have them be independent, but to think whatever they do, they are responsible for. Yeah. They're responsible for their actions. And if you can embed that in them, they'll think twice about doing something bad. And
what about in your maternal relationship to the artists and all of us who've come into this community? What kind of restraints and what kind of requests would you have for the way we interact with the town?
I think you interact wonderfully. Everybody is willing to do whatever they can to make everyone happy, and it's a good relationship. I have no complaints myself. I think it's wonderful what the artists have done. It brings people here, and we constantly people are driving through looking at all the art. And they're wonderful people. And if we have that odd one we have a problem with, we just go talk to them.
Yeah.
What the problem is, you know?
What do you think is that? What do you think? Besides just them being angry or bitter about change in general, do you think there's anything specific that is rubbing people the wrong way in terms of? I mean, obviously the art here is not. I think great art shouldn't be too. It shouldn't just be decoration. It should make a statement, and it should be somewhat provocative, right? So, do you think that they're responding to that provocation, or do you think that I don't know. What do you think is rubbing people the wrong way?
I don't know if it's jealousy. I mean, the property
Value.
value is coming up. I'd never thought I'd see that. I really don't know what their problem is. I've tried to get to the bottom of it, you know, and all I hear is, well, I want to do this and I want to do that like we used to, like we used to. Well, it's not going to happen. Life goes on.
Like we used to what? What is
We
that?
used to fish. We used to do this and that. Well, they're old now and they can't do the things they want to do. So maybe that's why they're so bitter. I don't know. They just turned into some other people.
Yeah.
You know, they're not themselves. I remember there used to be fun people.
And so let's talk about death a little bit, because obviously there's a lot of it here, right? I mean, there's a lot of the town itself, everybody thought was dying. It was dying in some way. Let's be honest. So I you know, like Richard said, that he's never been to so many memorial services as he had in this town. I mean, obviously that's partly because there's just a lot of old people, right?
And it's a small town.
Yeah.
You know, if you live in the city and you really don't know your neighbor, you know, it makes a difference. But here, everybody sort of knows everyone, and it's a small area. So if someone dies, you know about it, and then, you know, it just, they seem to go in threes.
Really?
Yeah. People die, and then there'll be two more, and then it'll be a few years, and the same thing. Strange.
And then and people do live a long time here. I remember Block. I don't know if he's still around, but he's like 102 a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, he was 103 when he went away. A lot of people lived in their 90s, well into their 90s.
I see him next door. He's how old is he now?
He must be what, 94 or 5?
He looks like he's 70. Like
Yeah.
walking around driving. And
Yep. Yeah. And Janie, she would too, but she just can't see to get around.
So but being so close to death, has it made you like come to terms with the idea of dying? Like a lot of people sweep that under the rug, right? Especially in American culture. Do you having to see it more honestly than most people, including one of your own children? Like, what is your philosophy on death?
Well, I just think it's, we go through that other door when we pass. And I was a paramedic for years, and I saw a lot of death.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of interesting things happened when people would die. And I've never really seen a spirit leave the body, but I know that happens. And it just, I have my own thoughts about when we expire on this earth, our spirit goes to another place. And knowing that, it gives a lot of comfort. And because people are afraid of death because they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, it should be talked about.
That's what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, we need to face it, and I'm afraid of it. I think anyone is. But I do think that we need to think about it. We need to talk about it, and in a way, it adds poignancy and meaning to, you know, if life went on forever, we could just do anything because we could always have time to do something else later.
Right.
Whereas we have to make choices that limit other choices, right?
But I believe in the soul. The soul is forever. And I think sometimes you'll meet someone and it's deja vu and you just feel very connected. Why is that? Maybe it's somebody that you knew in a past life. Or there's some people you meet and you just get a bad feeling. Mm-hmm. Same thing. It just, I think we have to keep coming back till we learn our lesson.
Yeah.
You know.
And
then there's spirit helpers that come.
And when you said you were a paramedic, you saw people dying, and what can you go more into detail about that? What you learned from that most of us don't get to see?
It's such an intimate time when someone is dying and you actually see them actually cease. It's such a different experience. It's very touching, and your heart goes out to that person. You know you can't do anything, but you're there to comfort. It's just a special time.
It's interesting. My mother describes that the same way. Like she got to sit with each of her parents as they died, and she said that there was no greater privilege in her life
Yes,
than to have had that moment with
yes,
each of them.
yes. It is a privilege to be with someone when they're leaving this earth. It just,
Wow. I haven't had that privilege yet, so I'm curious. And of course, losing a child must be the most difficult thing in there is in this life. No.
it was difficult because he died across the street from my house under the tree. And because Roger would lay down, and he'd sleep anywhere. So I'd go over and say, come on, you want to have some breakfast? No, no. So when I went back over a few hours later, he had passed away. And it was shocking because I didn't expect him to go away. So I checked him out and he was gone. So yeah, I miss him. But I know he's all around riding his bike still. Just really, just
Really?
not saying that. I just think a lot of our friends and family are around us constantly, guiding us. You hear that little voice in the back of your head when you have to make a decision, and sometimes it's very loud, and it's well, who are these voices, you know? Not that I'm not a schizophrenic or anything, but sometimes it's just you get these little things that say no,
Yeah.
don't go there.
Yeah. And then Stefan like made this such a beautiful memorial, I think.
Oh, I had no idea that was going to go on. I was just, I was just in awe. It was such a beautiful tribute.
Can you describe it a bit? Just a little background. Stefan decided who's uh, one of my two partners in the Biennale, had this beautiful idea to have a funeral procession, kind of like they do in New Orleans for Roger when he passed.
Oh,
And the whole town and the whole Biennale. This was during the Biennale weekend. Hundreds of people following these images of Roger on poster boards, right?
yes.
And there were people walking behind, and there was music. There was a kind of New Orleans style band and a fiddle and trumpets and
It was fantastic. I mean, what a tribute. I was just crying so much. I just wanted to thank everyone so much, and I just didn't know what to do. And we just went around there, and then the lady, they put her up on that lift, and she had that black flowing gown and had the poetry. It was all so magical. It was such a wonderful thing. All my life, I'll never forget, and I can't thank you enough,
I
all
had
of you.
nothing to do with it. But the I do think that these ceremonies we have, these rituals, that, and I think of the Biennale as that type of thing, like a thing that happens on a regular basis that we can expect, and we can gather together and we can think about deep things, whether it's explicitly in the philosophy conference, people having, doing talks, or more subtly, when people are confronted with a work of art that's meaningful, and just all of the shared experiences we have when we just gather a small number of people to celebrate something, whether it's a life, an idea, a body of work, like I think it's very, it's a beautiful and essential part of being human to not just be these isolated entities living just an, banal existence. It's easy to slip into that, right? You can get into your habits and just live alone. And but what I love about Bombay Beach is that it gathers us in this place, and we're forced together. We're forced to confront the deepest questions of life with death, with what human beings are doing to this earth, with the environmental issues, which can be very abstract and too big to kind of face. I mean, we talk about global warming and everything. Like, it's almost like, what is one person supposed to do? Whereas here, the environment is what you see in front of you, and like how can we clean up this water? How can we clean up this neighborhood and
Right.
and beautify it in a way that's not boring either, right? Like,
Well, I tell you, that's the biennale